If you're a fan of tabletop RPGs or have spent hours exploring dungeons in Dungeons & Dragons, you probably looked at Demeo and thought, that looks exactly like what I wanted in a digital version. But when the new Demeo Battlemarked arrives, the story changes a bit. There are several things no one is talking about, from gameplay changes to what truly connects or separates this experience from the classic D&D. Today, we're going to pull back the curtain and talk about the 7 things they haven't told you. What caught my attention the most in Battlemarked was the way the game reinvents D&D's classic 20-sided die. Instead of rolling and adding modifiers, the system uses a special Demeo die with only 3 results: miss, hit, or critical hit. This completely changes the dynamics of combat, making each roll more direct and full of suspense. For those who are tired of doing calculations and checking tables, this approach is a relief and a novelty that truly makes a difference in the experience. The distribution of the die is another detail that won me over. There are only 2 misses, 15 hits, and 3 crits. This means the game is designed to be tactical, but without losing pace. Combat flows fast, without that moment of paralysis to calculate armor, modifiers, or ability bonuses. Each roll is a strategic decision, and the result is immediate. It's as if the game says, stop thinking about numbers, focus on the action and the group's strategy. This reminds me of the feeling of playing a modern board game, where the focus is on interaction and not on mathematics. What pleases me the most is how this change makes combat more accessible to new players, yet still maintains the weight of the decisions. The miss, represented by the skull, is rare, so the error is not so frustrating. The hit is the most common result, ensuring the group advances, but the critical hit, with the crossed swords, brings the adrenaline rush of a decisive blow. It's a mechanic that values timing and coordination rather than depending on blind luck or complex calculations. Another point that makes me reflect is how this transforms the narrative experience. In traditional D&D, the focus is often on the numerical result, but in Battlemarked, the focus is on what happens on the table. The die becomes a visual object, and each roll is a moment of shared tension. This creates a stronger connection between the players, because everyone is involved in the result, without needing a dungeon master to interpret the rules. It's as if the game says, the story is ours, let's live it together. This innovation of the die is an example of how it is possible to reinvent a classic without losing its essence. Battlemarked manages to capture the spirit of D&D, but with a modern touch that values strategy, cooperation, and the emotion of combat. For those who like games that challenge the brain and the heart, this approach is an invitation to experience D&D in a completely new way. It is a change that deserves attention, especially for those seeking faster and more immersive experiences. The dice system in Dungeons & Dragons Battlemarked is even more interesting because it combines 2 different types of dice, each fulfilling an important role in the game. In addition to the famous simplified Demeo die used in combat, the game maintains the classic numerical D20 for skill checks outside of battles. This duality caught my attention because it delivers the best of both worlds: the agility and fluidity of combat with the special die, and the traditional narrative depth of the RPG, using the classic D20 with difficulty class. This coexistence gives the game a very cool balance. When you are out of combat, facing narrative challenges or making decisions that depend on the character's abilities, the traditional D20 comes into play. This die works exactly as in classic D&D. You roll, add your modifiers, and need to meet or exceed an established difficulty to succeed. This system maintains the essence of the tabletop RPG, providing that moment of suspense and strategy that is so much a part of D&D's narrative experience. I found this combination very smart, because it allows Battlemarked to be accessible and fast in battles, but without giving up the complexity and richness of telling a story within the Forgotten Realms universe. The simplified die takes the weight of calculations out of combat, accelerating the pace, while the D20 maintains the original flavor in moments where the character needs to use their skills, explore the scenario, or interact with the environment. This mix seemed quite friendly to those coming from the classic D&D world, but also to newcomers. In practice, this creates an immersive experience where each type of die delivers a clear and different function. You have fast, tactical combat that requires immediate decisions, and in contrast, you have the moments that require thinking and planning, where a roll can mean opening a safe, disarming a trap, or convincing an NPC. This alternation between narrative and action is a balance that left me quite excited about the game, as it rescues the complexity of the RPG while modernizing the gameplay. The use of these 2 dice systems is a brilliant example of design that respects the past and embraces innovation. Battlemarked manages to deliver an authentic D&D experience without being stuck in the bureaucracy of old rules, maintaining the tension and emotion that dice rolls bring to every story. For those who like RPGs within the Dungeons & Dragons tradition, but want something more agile and dynamic, this solution is a brilliant idea that deserves to be highlighted. The story of Bolthrax, the Copper Dragonborn Paladin in Dungeons & Dragons Battlemarked, is one of the most epic and emotionally charged narratives within the game. He starts as a strong character, a true brute, who believed his physical strength made him invincible. However, everything changed when he faced the ancient dragon Clouth, known as Old Gnawbone in Forgotten Realms lore, who humiliated and defeated him with ease. This defeat was not just a blow to Bolthrax's pride, but a moment that completely transformed his worldview and his self-perception. What touches me the most in this story is the role of the Silver Dragon Clarion, an inspiring figure who steps in to show Bolthrax a different path. Clarion, with her wisdom and power, revealed to him that true strength is not just in muscles or brutality, but in faith and justice. This transformation, motivated by loyalty to Bahamut, the dragon god of justice, makes Bolthrax reinforce his purpose not to dominate, but to protect those who have no voice. This journey of redemption seems fundamental to giving depth to the character, making him more human and interesting. It is fascinating to see how this backstory connects with classic themes of redemption and change within the D&D universe, but still has that personal touch that makes Bolthrax stand out among other paladins. He continues to be the brute everyone expects, but now his actions are guided by a higher sense of justice, which creates a rich dynamic between strength and morality. This contrast adds layers to the character that make me eager to see how he behaves in combat and interaction. For those who enjoy detailed lore and characters with deep motivations, Bolthrax's story is a full plate. It connects directly with the mythology of dragons in Forgotten Realms, such as the terror imposed by Clouth and the hope represented by Clarion, showing that even the toughest can find redemption and purpose. This elevates the game beyond a simple tactical experience to something that dialogues directly with rich narrative elements, an aspect that I value a lot in RPG games. This backstory makes me think about how the character design and their narrative contribute to a more immersive and emotional experience in the game. Bolthrax is not just a strong warrior, he is someone who carries a history of overcoming and faith, which makes him memorable. For me, this shows that Battlemarked invested in creating characters that are not just classes or archetypes, but living figures within the Forgotten Realms universe, with stories that truly matter and inspire. The curse that weighs on Lyria, the Elven Bard, is one of the most tragic and fascinating narratives in Dungeons & Dragons Battlemarked. It all begins when she dares to mock Libellus Anoreth, the Elven god of time, a truly powerful and respected deity within Forgotten Realms lore, known for governing the ordered passage of time and protecting the historical line against alterations. As punishment, Lyria receives a curse that makes her relive every death. However, with each rebirth, she returns older and marked by accumulating hauntings, making her existence an eternal struggle against aging and the weight of the past. What makes Lyria's situation even more touching is her desperate attempt to combat the effects of the curse through music. Her lute is not just a common instrument, it emits spectral harmonies that evoke the dead, an unfinished song that never ends and serves to delay the advance of the curse on her. This creates an almost poetic and melancholic atmosphere around the character, where her art is a form of resistance and constant struggle against the fatality of time and divine consequences. I find this combination of melody and curse to be something very profound and original, which adds a lot to the concept of the character. It is fascinating to think that this story puts Lyria in a dual position, an artist whose music is a source of hope and defense, but also a victim of a cruel curse that exposes her mortality in an extreme way. She lives this contradiction by playing her unfinished song, eternally trying to buy time, knowing that time is her greatest enemy. This curse, directly linked to Libellus Anoreth, brings a narrative richness that connects the character to the most mystical and philosophical aspects of time, a theme difficult to deal with in games, but here, treated with great sensitivity and creativity. In the context of the game, Lyria's curse is not just a lore detail, but an element that impacts her gameplay and immersion. Every time she dies, she carries the marks of time, and her music becomes a tool, both symbolic and strategic, to hold back this progression. This reminds me of how RPGs can use character histories to strengthen the player's emotional connection, making every action and choice more significant. It is an example of storytelling that goes beyond the surface and creates a memorable experience. For those who enjoy characters with intense trajectories and mystical elements, Lyria is a character who remains in memory precisely because of this unique curse. The connection with Libellus Anoreth, the idea of time as a tangible enemy, and music as resistance form a very strong and inspiring whole. For me, this story shows how Dungeons & Dragons Battlemarked invests in rich and emotional narratives, one of the reasons that make the game so special for those who like to tell deep stories while playing. One of the things that really got to me in Demeo, Dungeons & Dragons Battlemarked, is the visual care with the monsters, which undergo an incredible transformation to look like real miniatures. This artistic choice is not just aesthetic, it brings a much more tangible and authentic feeling to the game's universe. I love this tabletop plastic approach, with marks of dents, scars, and details that give life to those creatures, as if they had come directly from the classic manuals to the game table, but now with a palpable texture full of personality. The fact that the artists redesigned the monsters brings a new layer of respect to the D&D lore, especially because they don't just copy the creatures, but interpret them. A perfect example is the kobolds, which were designed to look shorter and more vicious, reinforcing the idea of the race as a tireless plague that can bother any group of adventurers. Knowing that they went so far as to delve into the old manuals to research these details shows a commitment that I truly value, bringing to the game an atmosphere that is both nostalgic and new. For me, this visual choice greatly helps in immersion because it facilitates the connection with the game world. They are not just digital images, they are miniatures that resemble those pieces we used to pick up, full of history, wear, and personality. This also makes tactical combat more interesting because each monster has an immediate visual profile that communicates its threat and fighting style. I think this approach is a great differential for those who enjoy board games and digital RPGs, connecting the best of both worlds. Furthermore, the concern with detailing scars and dents on the miniatures contributes to telling stories just with their appearance, something that plays very well with imagination and narration. Each mark can suggest a past battle, an aggressive lifestyle, or even the place where that creature came from. This attention to visual details is an efficient way to enrich the game's universe without needing long descriptions, which for me is a sign of a very well-made production designed to please both veterans and newcomers to the RPG. One of the things that fascinates me most in Demeo, Dungeons & Dragons Battlemarked is the subtle and intelligent way the game integrates references to classic adventures in the Forgotten Realms universe. It's not the kind of thing thrown in the player's face, but small details and locations like Cragmaw Castle, famous from the Lost Mine of Phandelver campaign, appear in a way that only those who know the lore notice. For me, this creates a special feeling, as if I were participating in a great narrative that dialogues with the D&D I already love, but in a refreshing and new way. Another reference I love is the city of Greenest, which comes directly from Tyranny of Dragons, one of the most emblematic campaigns of modern D&D. The way Battlemarked brings these locations not only as settings, but as an active part of the game, gives a sense of continuity and belonging. It's as if the game builds a bridge between familiar stories and its own journey, enriching the experience, especially for those who are already familiar with the official adventures and the deep lore of Forgotten Realms. The work with lesser-known but equally important locations, such as the Grey Peak Mountains, where a spirit naga appears, and High Shanatar, an ancient dwarf kingdom, shows how Battlemarked goes beyond the obvious. These references are an invitation to explore and delve into the lore, discovering connections and stories that perhaps we didn't even know. For me, this greatly values the game because it works as an intelligent tribute to the entire D&D universe, something that only the most attentive fans can grasp and fully appreciate. This subtle integration of locations and stories within Battlemarked also makes me think about how the game respects and expands the mythology of the Forgotten Realms. Instead of creating a parallel or completely unlinked universe, it carefully inserts itself into the canon, strengthening the feeling that your battles and choices are part of something greater. This extra layer of lore gives more depth to the experience and keeps the game rich in content and narrative potential, something I value immensely as an RPG fan. In the end, what enchants me the most about these hidden references is the perfect balance between novelty and tradition. For those who are longtime fans of Dungeons & Dragons, finding these points in the game is like discovering small treasures that add even more flavor to the adventure. For newcomers, these mentions work as natural introductions to a vast universe, encouraging them to explore more of the classic lore. Battlemarked thus manages to speak to the hearts of old and new fans, uniting generations of players at a single virtual table. One of the curiosities I find most cool is this secret reward for those who ventured into the demo during the Steam Next Fest. For those who faced the goblin ambushes in locations like Neverwinter Wood and Mushroom Hollow, an exclusive cosmetic for the game's D20s was unlocked in the final game. These small rewards are what I call treats for pioneers, because they value those who got to know the game from the beginning and faced initial challenges. This, in my opinion, creates a special and more personal connection with the game from the very first moment. The D20 cosmetic thing caught my attention because, for those who have played RPGs, they know that rolling dice is an almost sacred part of the experience. Having an exclusive pair that only those who dedicated themselves to the demo achieved gives a touch of identity and pride within the community. It's like a seal of recognition for veterans, a small trophy that represents effort and dedication. I really like it when games do this kind of appreciation, as it keeps the spirit of the community that grows around the title alive. Beyond the visual charm, I think this reward also connects to the nostalgia and traditionalism that Demeo and Battlemarked want to preserve. Rolling dice is part of the ritual of tabletop RPGs, and offering an exclusive pair of D20s is a subtle way to reinforce this tradition. For me, this increases immersion and the feeling of exclusivity, something every player likes to have, especially when it is linked to a festival or special launch period. Another point I think is cool is how the reward encourages players to explore the demo, experimenting with the game before the full launch. Ambushes with goblins in scenarios like Neverwinter Wood and Mushroom Hollow are great moments to test strategy and atmosphere, and knowing that completing these missions brings an extra prize gives an added incentive to dive deep. Furthermore, these locations are emblematic in Forgotten Realms lore, which adds even more weight to the experience. In the end, this secret demo reward is a tremendous touch of affection from the developers to the community. It rewards the first fans who believed in the game's potential, while reinforcing the connection between the digital and the tradition of tabletop RPGs. For me, this type of detail is what makes Demeo Dungeons & Dragons Battlemarked stand out, showing that it is a game conceived with love, respect for the history of RPGs, and for the player's experience.
Looks like our escapee got homesick, and he brought a friend too. Boys, get him!
It is the foe's turn. It is the foe's turn.